Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. Based on my book by the same name, this podcast is for those of us who believe in personal growth and want to improve every day. This is episode 13, Praise. I had a difficult Saturday this week. It started when I came downstairs to find my daughter asleep on the sofa and a pile of dog poop in the living room. She was supposed to be watching our new puppy, Luna, taking her out and generally just being more responsible. Instead, she was out cold, phone in hand, and the puppy was running around totally unsupervised. This wasn't the first time Zoe had done this either. Luna gets up before everyone else, as puppies will do. Zoe gets up with her, takes her outside, and then is supposed to watch her and play with her. Instead, she usually just falls back asleep, giving Luna the run of the house. There have been several mornings, in fact, that I've come down to this and bitten my tongue, taking Luna out and then letting Zoe continue to sleep. Don't sweat the small stuff, right? Pick your battles, right? She's a teenage girl after all, and she did get up with Luna, even if she did fall back to sleep. But on this morning, with the poop sitting right there in the middle of the living room floor, I was mad, and there were knives in my words when I woke Zoe up. While she struggled to wake up, I went back upstairs for something. Luna followed me up the stairs and pooped in the house again. And that's when I really lost my temper. The kind, patient, don't sweat the small stuff version of myself was overtaken by the dark side. I raised my voice, started cussing, and pretty much threw a temper tantrum. Can you imagine waking up to that? Wouldn't you just love to start your day with Daddy hulking out, stomping around, yelling at you? It wasn't pretty, and I'm not proud of it. But at the time, all I could see was red. I felt completely justified in losing my temper. Watching the puppy was a job that Zoe had agreed to, and she had shirked her responsibilities. She deserved this wrath, and she was going to learn her lesson, even if it meant waking up to a madman. Of course, she didn't want to be around me after all that, so she cleaned up the messes and she disappeared to her room. Meanwhile, I tried to calm down and rein in my anger. So I took a deep breath and grabbed something to read. Meanwhile, my wife had also woken up to this chaos, so you can imagine the mood she was in. When she came down the stairs, I could tell she was annoyed with me, so I tried to give her some space. I focused on my book while she made her coffee. Then I was surprised when she came at me with the little venom of her own. Well, that was a fun way to get up on my day off. Thank you for that. Oh, and your daughter is upstairs crying her eyes out. What? I said, over some dog poop and a scolding? She's overreacting. Well, she said you're always mad at her and she can't ever do anything right. If this had been 5 minutes earlier, I probably would have stomped upstairs and told Zoe that she was being ridiculous. I would have defended myself, saying something like, "Are you kidding me right now? I'm always mad at you, really? What about when we went on a drive the other day and we took pictures? And do you remember singing Taylor Swift together? Oh, and do you realize that I turn your bedroom light off every single time I walk by your room and I never scold you about it anymore? Can we talk about how many times I've found your Invisalign on the counter and not grounded you for not having them in your mouth? I work really hard at this relationship and you think I'm always mad at you? That's ridiculous." That would have gone over so well. And by so well, I mean it would have been a disaster. So I didn't do that. I decided that I wasn't going to come down on her for anything the rest of the day. I was going to give her space and prove to her that I wasn't always mad. So I wrote the word "don't" on my wrist to remind me, don't scold her, don't nag her, don't get angry, just don't. For the rest of the day, every time I got the urge to parent Zoe for something, I looked at my wrist and it stopped me in my tracks. I bit my tongue and I didn't yell at her. But here's the thing. It totally backfired. Taking away my own power as her parent felt like a punishment of its own. If biting my tongue was literal, I would have bitten it off by the end of the day. I was still focusing on all the negative and then I was bottling it up. And it put me in a terrible mood. I was not fun to be around for most of the day. Sure, I wasn't yelling or nagging, but I was brooding. and my internal battle was still visible on the surface. Don't turned out to be a terrible idea. The next morning, I got up. I still didn't have a story to tell in this week's podcast, so I decided to listen to the book that started it all, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's an old book, but it has come through for me on so many occasions. I figured there would be an everyday lesson in there worth writing about. I actually had no intention of telling you the story I just shared with you, and I didn't really have any resolution to it anyway. That's when I was reminded about the work of B.F. Skinner. The book says this great contemporary psychologist has shown by experiments with animals and with humans that when criticism is minimized and praise emphasized, the good things people do will be reinforced and the poorer things will atrophy for lack of attention. Oh my God, duh! Here was an everyday lesson that I knew but really needed to hear. And the crazy part is that I've been using this lesson for weeks with our new puppy. Notice when I told you the story earlier, I didn't say anything about punishing Luna for having accidents in the house. That's because having had dogs my whole life, I know that the best way to potty train a puppy is to praise her when she goes outside, to give her love and snuggle her little head and say, "Good girl, you're such a good girl. You went potty outside, good girl." Oh, you know your voice goes up an octave when you talk to your puppy. The point is, the light switch had come on. This was exactly the lesson I needed to hear at exactly the right time. It's funny how often that happens, actually. Of course Zoe felt like she couldn't do anything right. The majority of our conversations were me nagging or criticizing her. And when I wasn't criticizing her, I was biting my tongue and not saying anything to her. I certainly wasn't praising her. So I wrote the word praise on my wrist, and I spent the rest of the day looking for ways to praise her. And here's the awesome part. There were actually a lot of opportunities for praise. When I looked at her and her actions through that lens, I didn't see an irresponsible teenager. I saw a kind, loving, generous girl. I saw someone who was fun to be around, who had a lot of energy and an infectious smile. When I asked her to do a chore, even if she rolled her eyes and took her time getting around to it, I thanked her profusely. I told her that I appreciated not having to get up at 5:30 in the morning with Luna. I caught her wearing her Invisalign and praised her for being responsible. The results were immediate and profound. She was suddenly on her best behavior, giving me no sign of grief when I asked for her help, and even doing things like cleaning up her messes without being asked. I was the better version of myself, and it resulted in her being the better version of herself. I could go on about the value of praise, but here's the thing about this lesson. It's so obvious that I don't need to. You know in your heart how it makes you feel when you are criticized. And you also know how praise makes you feel. Today's everyday lesson isn't meant to be some revelation, but rather a simple reminder. As Dale Carnegie puts it, be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. And so I challenge you, write the word praise on your wrist. See the best in people and point it out to them. Cut back on the criticism and focus on the good things they do. Be sincere in your comments, flattery won't work, and be vocal with your gratitude. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.